Hello, welcome to Locana Lounge. I'm your host, Jen Campbell, focusing on innovation and product growth here at Locana. And I'm joined today by Karen Volarich, who focuses on architecting GIS in the cloud and Kubernetes. Now, cloud computing and foundationally cloud hosting is a technology wave that we know we can't avoid. It's not really a question of if, it's a question of how and when. And a lot of the companies that we partner with are in various stages of adapting their architecture to leverage this. And they're also in varying stages of acceptance. I think, Karen, what at least what I've seen, and I think I've heard from you a few times, is that, it's kind of like, we know it's there. We see that all the IT platforms are moving in that direction. And, maybe for those who have been a little more proactive, they're softening into it. They kind of know starting to get the feel for it. But others, it might be a bit more intimidating. And in particular with geospatial technology, what we've noticed is some ways to make this easier. And in some of those organizations, we've also found that when there's a GIS evangelist that can kind of see that power of GIS and also understands that future wave, kind of where technology is going and how to weave all these things together, kind of that visionary, but in the GIS space, right? We've seen them start to build out the roadmap for their whole organizational IT. And we've also seen that as GIS has been woven into those roadmaps and kind of where the IT vision and future growth is going within that organization, that again, some of those efficiencies, that ease of adopting some of the new tech is coming through with a GIS flavor. So, and Karen, I know you've been in the heart of some of this stuff, so I'm really interested to kind of kick us off today and get your initial thoughts on how you've seen GIS effectively pave the way for organizations to do this cloud migration.
So GIS has long established a way to get into the cloud. Esri has definitely been at the forefront of pushing things into the cloud, either through ArcGIS Online, where it's their own service that you can just, pay as you go, or in most cases, people want to move their GIS infrastructure into the cloud. And there are a lot of tools that are already available to make that happen in a seamless manner. Most folks have had their exposure to the cloud being Office 365, for example. They've adopted that and they're like, yeah, we're in the cloud. But are they? Not really. So it's true. They're like, they purchase the subscription because that's your option these days. You purchase that subscription and you're done. And they're like, congratulations, you're in the cloud. Except all of your other systems, your ERPs, your day-to-day functionality for budgeting and everything else are still on premise.
Yes.
And or you're perhaps in a data center, which is technically you're still the one going to that data center and managing the hardware, and you're managing to a certain extent the networking.
Yeah.
And if you've ever had to go to a data center, it's not fun.
No,
they're loud, it's cold.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not only that, but it's like you walk into that thing and you get this sense of overwhelming responsibility to keep it all up and running. I think that for those who have lived and breathed that world, it's a lot more obvious to them what the benefit of that cloud, because oh my God, we don't have to carry this weight anymore, and not to mention
literally
carrying a server option.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Literally carrying your equipment into a data center, setting up the racks, and make sure you don't touch anybody else's, Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
so moving to the cloud just makes sense, and letting somebody else deal with that infrastructure who is an expert in dealing with that infrastructure, they have gone through all of the security protocols you're supposed to go through. It's all certified through all the different organizations. You can
Yes.
see that information at the different cloud providers. You get that information saying, yes, this infrastructure is secure. You don't have to worry about, where your stuff is. You don't have to worry about the
Exactly.
networking. We're going to guarantee it stays up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a huge part of it too, right? Because I think when cloud computing first kind of hit the market and people started to realize it's not just about signing up for some,
Hmm.
basic chat app or running
Right.
email kind of thing. They realized that, oh my gosh, my ERP system has to go to that. And like,
Hmm.
okay, now, and my enterprise asset management data, right? All
Yes.
just trying to wrap their head around those major platforms. Security was a huge question. But the fascinating part is it's more secure
Hmm.
because those systems are on a regular basis getting updates with the latest patches. They're a
Hmm.
lot more proactive than an individual organization is set up to be to stay
Right.
ahead of those security breaches, right? So I
Yep.
think, it's fascinating for me to have watched this evolution and just like realize that in in my soul, right? Like, wow, this isn't even a fear anymore. But I think, back to the point of it being kind of overwhelming with these major systems moving. One of the things I heard from you through some of our chats is that with the GIS perspective, it's really lowers some barriers
Yes.
because it's not as massive of a system as your ERP or even your
Right.
enterprise asset management, depending on how it's structured and architected. So
Hmm.
make something that's a bite-sized piece that you can A, move over just because it's not quite as large data-wise.
Right.
But the other thing is it has a smaller user group. And so
Right.
then you can do things like user access management, maybe even device access management, right? Is
Hmm.
that, am I thinking about that right? Are those some of the benefits that
Yes.
you're seeing?
Yes. It's much more of a self-contained system. So, even though there's a database, even though there's a presentation tier, it's a tightly coupled environment. Um, so you're able to migrate your entire GIS in a fairly seamless manner. When you do that deployment, it's everything all together, and you can migrate your content. We have tools for bringing that over that takes
That's
the headache out of manually copying one thing at a time,
awesome.
which
Exactly.
anybody who's ever done this before the tools knows what that is. It's painful. When you have systems like an ERP or asset management, there's the software itself, but then there's all the peripherals that go with it. There's
Hmm.
multiple databases, and you're like, do I have to move all the databases at the same time? How do I do all of that? With GIS being that it's a self-contained enterprise,
Hmm.
you're able to bring the whole thing at once.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah. So
Hmm.
I think that was one of the things as we've talked through, how our customers think about the cloud, how we've engaged with some of these cloud opportunities, right? And because we're we're GIS and how that interconnects with everything else,
Hmm.
right? And what is the IT vision? We help to build that out. So it's natural for us to be thinking about the broad cloud strategy, but also
Right.
because of that expertise, we can identify that particular
Well,
benefit.
and with GIS in the cloud, a lot of times, especially for asset management, you sort of have that hybrid. You could continue with like a hybrid environment until you get that asset management system into the cloud.
Oh,
So
yeah. Okay.
even though GIS is in the cloud, it can still talk back to your on-premise asset management, ERP, however you want to set that up.
Yeah,
So
that's
you're
pretty
not you're
powerful.
not separating them. You're just you're able to move that piece over. And so you can then have that environment where you're like, okay, now I understand how this works. I understand how security works. I understand how I have to do patch management. how all of that works. So it sort of sets that path for you for then doing the rest.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I wanted to also just take a minute and hear some of your background, Karen, because as we were talking just for a few minutes, hinting at if you ever manage your own, your own data center, if you've ever done that manual work. So I'd love if you could share just, in a few minutes, what kind of how you grew into this, right? Like, what are some of those experiences that you're tapping into now and has kind of built up your passion for this technology coming out?
So I've been in GIS for about 25 years. I started out, my background was actually, I started out doing some database work and web interfaces, and I helped build probably one of the first 311 applications that was ever done for South Florida. So when hurricanes were happening, people could call in and be like, hey, there is a tractor that has blown into a canal. And we were able to geocode where it was located and all sorts of stuff. So that when the storm was over, we knew where to send people to help with the cleanup. So that was one of my first, and we did a lot of very cool stuff with some early mobile applications to then have people in the field with those.
It's amazing.
So that and I started my own company. I did a lot of work with healthcare and police organizations, and I actually did some work with a lot of GPS work with some of the county folks down in Miami-Dade. So
a lot of GIS there. That's great. Oh
gosh. and then I moved on to federal work when I moved out here. So and I literally helped move us from our on-prem servers into a data center. Like, we were there in that data center for multiple days, like racking servers, hooking up all the networking. Freezing, absolutely freezing, barely able to hear each other because it was so loud. Yes. So and then moved into virtualization and I actually started doing some cloud work all the way back in, I want to say it was like 2004, 2005, where I started using a hybrid version of storing data there because it was just too large for a lot of organizations to store locally, especially imagery.
Wow. That's well, there you go.
I've always tried to get everybody to a place where they didn't have to keep buying equipment.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a really great segue too, because well, as we've kind of chatted, and I've learned more about your experiences, it's like it felt like a really natural flow because you've lived it. You've lived GIS. You've lived trying to build out those applications and handle so much data flow coming in and out and handle customer requests and for urgent situations, right? And then on top of that, leading into now you're running those physical, server rooms. And like, again, with the background that you were describing there, being critical systems to drive critical decision making and critical
disaster management response was very much a part of my day-to-day life for a good 10 years. Yes.
That's pretty amazing. And so, as you were describing, no longer having to literally bear the weight, the burden of these machines and moving them around and understanding the cost and the work and the labor that goes into that. So my next question, but it's kind of like you're leading into this, the benefits that you see customers gaining from doing this cloud migration, right? That's the first question. And then the next one after that is kind of like, well, with all the great stuff, kind of what are some of the challenges? But let's start with benefits. Anything else that you want to add
Uh,
flavor to?
Obviously, the not having to buy the infrastructure. I mean, you're sort of renting it, but you're not physically having to purchase that infrastructure. You're not buying servers. You're not having to get rack space. You're not having to pay for all the networking, not directly. You're having somebody else do it, and because of the volume at which they do that, they can have it at a much lower cost than what you would be paying for it if you were storing everything on premise. In
Yeah.
addition to that, you're on premise, you're also having to deal with, emergency backups. Where do you have an entire, generator system to help you?
Yep.
Do you have a giant generator that's going to keep all of this equipment running? Not to mention a cooling system to keep all of that equipment at the correct temperature so it doesn't overheat. So there's so much more that goes into maintaining your own infrastructure. So right there is a huge benefit. Not to mention the people. Are you going to have people in that room 24/7?
Yep.
Yep.
And the
Cameras,
risk of
security
having that,
systems,
yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Installing biometric, doing all of that instead of just having a cloud provider deal with that, offer you the same equipment and security at a significantly less cost because of the volume that they're able to do it at. So
Yeah.
that's it. That to me is the biggest benefit. Anybody who's ever had to deal with setting up a whole computer room and maintaining it
Yeah.
knows what that's like.
Yeah.
It's huge difference.
Well, I think we'll get more into this too in a bit, but I also know that the flexibility of what you're able to rent essentially and pay for is
Right.
huge too, because not only, from maybe on month to month basis can you change things up based on your consumption, but you can do it
Right.
on a more granular usage basis, right? So if you know there's certain times of day where there's higher usage, then you can have more resources available. You can't do that if you physically own it.
If you have a physical, congratulations. We're
Yeah,
together
you
for a
own
long
that
time.
forever.
Yeah.
The biggest
Right.
load you can imagine, you own. And by the way, if it goes beyond that, you're toast.
Right. So, or maybe you bought too big of a machine and you're barely using it because you were like, I'm just going to buy the biggest, most expensive machine and hope that we get enough growth to justify it. With the cloud, you're able to have an unbelievable array of choices and operating systems.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing, I can pick and choose.
That's right. That's right.
So the benefits are tremendous just in the flexibility.
Yeah, that's very well stated. So then, if we think about again, we know change is always hard. Anytime there's a shift, a million questions come up, which I as much as I like to say I'm a change management, like someone who's done that a lot, and I'm up for new things. When it comes down to it, change can be tough for me too. So I have that understanding. But other than kind of that initial hesitation, right, that you see with customers, what are some of the other challenges that you've personally experienced when you help them do these migrations?
So one of the biggest things I've seen is not planning enough and not preparing, trying to do everything all at the same time. We're going to move everything all at once.
Okay.
And when you try to do something like that, it's going to take you far longer. It will take you years to figure it all out because you're now trying to move your entire organization all at once. Do it in pieces, plan it out, figure out how everything relates. Also budget. Budget seems to be a big one. And what ends up happening is you move something and you're like, wow, that was more expensive than I thought it would be. Well, part of that also gets back to skills. And
Okay.
who do you have doing this migration? Is it somebody who
Okay.
actually knows what they're doing, or are they learning on the
Yeah.
job? Um,
Yeah.
Waste in the cloud is actually becoming a thing. So
Wow, that's interesting.
people spin up machines, but then forget to take them down if they're not using them anymore. I'm going to
Okay.
test
Okay.
something, but not delete it afterward. And so
Mm.
you're now maintaining things you shouldn't be maintaining. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
but it's knowing that, having the right people help you plan this out, have not just a plan in place, but sort of a maintenance in place at the beginning.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
this way you're monitoring usage.
That's
There's
a
a way
great
to
point.
budget all of this in a way that you actually get your return on investment instead of spending way more than you ever expected you were going to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really, really great point. Having the maintenance plan, the maintenance vision and approach as
Hmm.
figured out beforehand to make sure you are getting as much return from your investment as you can along the way as you actually use it and leverage it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you kind of mentioned this idea of don't do everything at once, do
Hmm.
little pieces at a time, do modular things. So I spent about a decade in doing ERP implementations, and for the ERP side, it felt like, like it's so interconnected that
Hmm.
finding those pieces that are modular are pretty tough. But the other thing you mentioned was that GIS is a great option for that.
It
Um,
really is.
yeah,
It,
yeah. So
it,
I just love for you to elaborate a little bit more
sure.
on kind of why and how you see that play out for customers.
Again, because it's self-contained. And what I mean by self-contained is you have your presentation tier, you have your data tier, you have your application tier. And because of the way the software is designed, you can deploy all of it to the cloud in a single script. Um, so you
Impressive.
we've worked on putting scripts together that help us deploy this, so that the script builds your infrastructure, deploys your software, configures your security, you're done.
Wow.
So
That's amazing.
yes. And so you have all of your self-contained data application presentation tier ready to go. So it's that's the thing about the GIS system. It's also an interesting way that it's less less people are in there using it on an editing level, and an analysis level, but
Hmm.
there are a lot that may interact with it. So it's while it's a smaller footprint, it tends to be highly visible. Yeah,
Oh,
everybody
okay.
loves maps,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
so
That's true. They're easy to
and
understand.
they're easy to understand. And a good example, again, COVID, all the dashboards that came out, that's your presentation tier. Everybody was interacting with those, but it may have been only one or two people on the back end that were maintaining that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Interesting.
it's a smaller footprint with a high visibility.
Brilliant, brilliant. So not only is it modular, self-contained, you can set it up with one script, which is
Hmm.
impressive, and the team to maintain it is also a small lift, but
Yes.
you get high visibility across your organization, which can win you some major traction
Hmm.
with your migration program, right? So
That
if
is
folks
correct.
can start interacting with the application layers and leveraging those whatever map-based analysis, spatial analysis they need to do
Hmm.
their job, they can get the feel that it's on the cloud and it's
Right.
seamless and it's secure. There's no, like once it's there, it's the same experience. And so I suspect that leads to a lot of confidence, which, again, with change management, so much of it is just about that confidence level and that
Yes.
reducing the anxieties of what it's going to mean to be on the cloud.
Right.
Yeah.
I
So I
I
think that's pretty powerful.
and I will say, one assumption that is definitely always made is security is inherent in the system, and it is to a certain extent, but there's also a responsibility on those setting it up to make sure that they have those configurations set up the way they need to be. Only have, set up what ports should be exposed. All of that still could be handled and can be handled by a script. But
that's pretty
you
amazing
still
too.
need to know that you don't want to leave default configurations in place. I have seen this happen where it's been deployed and somebody left a default password in. And you don't, you can script that out that says change this password.
Yeah, okay.
Things
So
like that.
That was, I'm happy you mentioned that, because I was wondering what are some of the ways that you've been able to lean into this to reduce risk for organizations. And I think what I'm hearing is that we have a lot of expertise in this area. So it's really about hiring the right people to know to look for that kind of stuff and double check it.
Exactly.
And that, through the years, as we've helped customers to do this within their organizations, we've also built out best practices and tools that make this a lot easier, and that have that kind of thing built in. You will double check it, but by default, that script will run through and reset that password.
Correct. So yes, it helps reduce the risk to the client. Yeah. If your experience, your knowledge, and you're able to script out everything for them, make adjustments based on their needs, it's easy enough to do in the various tools that we have, and migrate their data through another tool set.
Yes.
That helps reduce risk.
That's pretty great that, that those types of repeat use tools can be built and leveraged, and therefore make it a really short time to value for customers. So not only are they tackling cloud migrations in a less risky way, but now they're also leaning into some expedited approaches to that.
Right.
So, which gets me into, I think, one piece that we've been talking about as some of our marketing stuff relates to environment management, right? Like GIS environment management, and how to kind of expedite that promotion and management, and specifically with some of those Kubernetes scripts that you've been able to write. So I love it if you could just expand a little bit and say, because it's interesting to me how big of a pain point that is. So maybe tell just what that's like out of the box, and then how some of the stuff we've built helps to fix that.
So Kubernetes is definitely my passion these days, and Kubernetes is an orchestration tool. It's a tool set for deploying containerized versions of GIS. So you're able to break down, and Esri has come out with an ArcGIS Enterprise for Kubernetes, that you're able to deploy GIS into microservices. And the reason this is such a huge leap forward is because instead of, let's say you're in the cloud, you scale your environment based on demand. Well, it can sometimes take a good 10, 15 minutes for that new instance to get created. You're creating a new, you're bringing up a new machine, you're applying an operating system, you're applying all the security to it. And I mean, it's still being scripted. And once upon a time, to say that, 15 minutes is a long time. You think about that now and you're just like, 15 minutes is a long time.
Yeah.
And by the time the machine is ready to go and is joined to your other machines, it's possible that the demand has already diminished. And so now it needs to scale back down. So where Kubernetes comes in is now you're basing demand on the exact service that is being requested. So let's say it's I'm trying to generate replicas, or I am trying to hit a specific feature service, and I need more of those to be available. Well, then I have already predefined in my Kubernetes infrastructure to increase the number of pods, which are microservices, for that particular item. And so it scales up in milliseconds. And so
Wow.
the pods become available. And
That's
you
such
should
a
see, and you don't have any, impact on performance. It to the end user, my system's just working. The system
that's
is working.
amazing. Yeah.
And when the demand diminishes, those pods go away.
Wow. That's, I mean, it's only through
It's exciting.
living and
It's exciting.
breathing GIS on the cloud and the technologies as they kind of exist now, could you figure out that approach, and because it's just so clever, right? And um like I can't wait for us to be talking more about this and promoting this more at some of our upcoming conferences and things, because I anyone who really lives and breathes this, has tried to do this, is going to be like, what?
There's
Yes.
so many applications for it. So many.
Exactly. So and anyway, the more that I chat with you about it, the more, yeah, for me, it's just like another level of empowerment, another level of risk reduction, of performance, improving performance for customers, and letting them see that get the highest possible value out of this investment, right? So, which is huge.
Exactly.
So, since you've been involved in so many of these migration projects, and clearly, your experience is coming through really well, and it's been, hearing some of your insights and direct customer, I guess, feelings of seeing that value, but also helping them through those challenges, right? What are just some top takeaways, right? And kind of a summary as you're thinking about this in a summary level.
At a summary level, again, planning makes all the difference. It always has, it always will. Doesn't matter if it's on premise, in the cloud, wherever. If you don't have a plan in place on how you want to approach this, which, needs assessment.
Yes.
We do those all the time. We help with those. We sit down with the customer and what is it you're trying to accomplish? How can we help get you there? And make a plan.
Yes.
And we can help assess that, give you a thorough report, tell you, hey, short term, this would be a good approach, and then mid and long. And so you have a vision, not just for the next few months, but the next few years.
That's pretty amazing. Well, and I think it goes along with what you were saying throughout the conversation, right? Of plan, make sure you know how to handle these different situations before taking these next steps and doing the migration. But part of that is, to your point, having the right people who have done this, who have that expertise. They know the right questions to ask. They know what plans to make, such as, hey, what's your maintenance plan going to be? How, you got to make sure you're not just going to be leaking extra money and wasting resources. The only way you learn that is from that experience. But I'm also glad you mentioned the assessment pieces too, because that, as we've been thinking about how to reduce the barrier for engaging with a partner on cloud migrations. You don't have to just take the big plunge if you're not quite ready, right? Especially we're talking about some of those customers that, either from not having enough funding at the perfect time, or if they're a smaller organization and just don't have as many resources to be as proactive, whatever the reason, if it's on the newer side to do this with your ERP and you're not sure where to start, the assessment approach is so perfect, because it's not a big investment to do that. You get to understand where you're at with an expert, and then you get to have that starting point of a plan, and that's where your vision can start to come together. And we can offer things like, let's move your GIS first, because it's not a big lift.
Right. It helps give clarity as to where you want to go. A lot of times people are just like, everything to the cloud. It's like, no. I will tell you, no, not immediately. Break it into pieces. Do yourself a favor.
That's brilliant.
Yes.
I think it's really a great takeaway. So and again, one of my favorite points of our recent conversations has really been about GIS as that beacon. The first thing you can move over because it is modular. There is a lower lift in terms of your maintenance team, and it has high visibility, so you can build that confidence across your organization that the cloud is not scary at all. It
No, it's
brings
not.
so much value, and the things that you might have read online or
Right.
on different social media posts, a lot of times they're actually better in the cloud. You just need that deeper level of understanding, which I think that assessment, that as kind of a first step, and then GIS being a good option is the first thing actually migrated can help to really highlight.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Any last thoughts, Karen, before we wrap up?
Nope. Sorry, my brain just went.
I'll take that as a compliment that questions all asked, but also to you, because again, really great insights, and your experience is just shining through. And so glad that I get to work with you and learn from you every day. This is really great. But last plug is for any other collateral that you would like to check out, you can go to locana.co. We have a lot of publications about the cloud. We actually have another Locana Lounge that kind of talks about, from the broader perspective, some of those security issues and things like that, how much stronger that is. So please visit us on locana.co and find some of that collateral. And of course, anytime reach out on LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to connect and again point you in the right direction. So thanks so much for joining.